wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Faisal Kassim and welcome to the live Real Talk where we all along. He is a man, a great man, a father figure, a mentor. I just learned a couple of seconds ago that he's a trained journalist. Dr. Mustafa Ali, Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu wa rahmatullah.
Tell us something about yourself, because I honestly cannot put words to you, to the profession, to the experience that is sitting in front of me.
1996.
Wow. Oh man. 23 years ago.
That's right. Worked at a number of broadcasting stations here in the country. Then I think there were only two, KBC and KTN.
Yes, definitely.
I did work in both. And after about 4 years, I hung my boots.
That was in 2000?
In 2000 as a journalist.
Wow.
And then I really wanted to do or engage in what we used to read as news in terms of conflict. So I did go into conflict resolution. And to do that, you needed to have more education, more experience. And so I did go and study for master's and my PhD and postdoctorate in the United Kingdom.
Wow.
Then worked outside the country for a few years, then came back around 2008. So I've been around since 2008.
Thus, the mastery in the Queen's language. When I grow up, I want to be like you. Congratulations. Thank you so much, Mustafa.
Thank you. Thank you.
Part of what you've said is entangled to our topic tonight. You developed interest in handling matters, conflict resolutions. Why was that?
Yeah, the reason for that is, well, it was just an interesting space, and the issues that were coming up then. In the 90s, the Cold War had just ended. There was a rise in nationalism across the world. Countries that were kind of cobbled together because of the Cold War were disintegrating, the former Yugoslavia, and we had horrendous incidences of both political and religious extremism in the Balkans in the 90s, Sri Lanka, Latin America kind of was pacifying. Some countries in Africa got into trouble with many groups taking up to arms and fighting governments, insurgents, rebels, belligerents, from Liberia to Sierra Leone to Burundi, Rwanda.
South Africa even got the independence in the late 90s.
That's right. That was in the mid 1990s. So I thought it was an interesting area to venture in. That's right.
Interesting. And right now in the country, someone cannot talk about building resilience against violence extremism without mentioning Dr. Mustafa Ali. Tell us about the organization.
No, it's not an organization. BRAVE, which is the long of building resilience against violent extremism, is actually not an organization. It's a movement. And it's
being sold as an organization. We think it's an organization.
No, it's not.
With the vision.
It's not an organization. It is a movement. It's a movement for everybody. And BRAVE came about as a result of the challenges that we saw in 2015, actually. Many young people were being radicalized into extremism and terrorism. Many groups that were very extreme were recruiting many young boys and girls increasingly to join their ranks and file. And very little was being done to actually prevent the recruitment. And so along with a few other brothers and sisters, we thought that, hey, we have to do something. Then you could not talk about jihad, because the jihad that was being talked about was the jihad that was neither here nor there, the jihad of killing people, the jihad. Clerics, imams, sheikhs were scared, even in the mosques, to talk about jihad.
Yes.
And people were losing their lives. People were crossing over into Somalia to go and join a group that they thought then was actually carrying out acts of jihad, yet it was a different case. So we established a program that was ideological in nature to push back the narratives of the extremists.
What are some of those programs that you developed, Dr.
So one of the program that were pretty much on ideological pushback is we looked at the narratives, we looked at the texts, the videos that were developed and were on the internet, were circulating by terrorist groups. ISIS at that time was really a master of propaganda. So we took all of them and studied them. And what we wanted to do is to understand more, why was ISIS very successful in recruiting our young men and women? And what we did find actually in those narratives is they were very clever. They actually focused on about 8 what we'd call meta-narratives. A meta-narrative is an overarching, a totalizing ideology, and upon those 8 meta-narrihs, they came up with so many narratives. When you talk, one of the meta-narrative, for example, is jihad, and for them, jihad was to look for non-Muslims and kill them. Jihad for them was to fight to establish what they call the Khilafah, which now then is the second meta-narrative. Jihad was something else, not what we understood as when we were taught when we were growing up.
So you believe that they sold the wrong narrative of jihad?
Absolutely, absolutely.
ISIS and our neighboring militia, Al-Shabaab.
That's right. They sold the wrong narrative, and they misused Islam for their own political ends. In Somalia, in Iraq, in Syria, and for the case of Boko Haram in Nigeria. And many Faisal, here's the point. Many young people fell for these narratives. And so some of them joined these groups.
And that's my next question, Dr. Because we're having research from a couple of organizations, UNDP, the New Humanitarian, which is former IRIS, and we are having the Life and Peace Institute.
Yeah.
Different research, different articles, a lot of pieces have been written about it. Why do you think that a lot of people fell for the narratives?
Because they were unprepared, ignorant. They thought that these groups spoke their language and were there for their interests, and therefore they, out of a sheer ignorance, if I may say, and not understanding Islam, they joined this group.
Ignorance from what perspective, Doctor? Because when you're looking at this, when you're looking at radicalization, there are people. I'll give an example. In 2015, the Garissa University attack.
That's right.
One of the persons who was suspected to be the culprits, the main people leading from the militia side, was a graduate, a law degree from the University of Nairobi. So when you're talking about ignorance, from which angle?
Islam, mainly. And you know, you can be a doctor and you are still ignorant. Ignorance does not mean that you didn't go to school. Ignorance means that you're ignoring things. You can be a PhD, a professor, and as long as you ignore stuff, you're ignorant. And so if you look at the profiles of those who actually have been engaged in violent extremism and terrorism, many of them, the foot soldiers, do not have much education. We do have a few, though, that have a well-educated, doctors even, and are joining these groups for other reasons other than religion. So it's if what we call the appeal to violent extremism and joining radical groups, and the structural factors that push young people mainly to join these groups are many. There are actually about 16, 17 different factors. And you would see that in some of those, there were a combination of factors. For example, you're talking about the lawyer who is well known and actually participated in the Garissa terrorist attack.
Yes.
There are many reasons that pushed that young man to joining Al-Shabaab and did what he did.
That would like to look at some of those reasons.
In Garissa, yes.
You said something in your speech, that these people, they were lured into thinking that the propagators of this radicalization was speaking their language. They could find that relation with whatever was being said to them, and that's why they were lured, and that's why they joined these forces.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. And it's not just here in Kenya. The United States State Department did produce a report way back in 2014-15 about ISIS propaganda. And at that time, they themselves admitted that ISIS had better propaganda, better communication, strategic communication strategy than the superpower. Wow. They tell, I mean, if they could beat the US in terms of communication and the strategy, you know, who are we? So many young people fell into that trap. And I'm sure many of them are regretting that today. Well, that's water under the bridge. What we need to do is to address the mistakes, the errors. We should have spoken about and against terrorism from way back, Faisal. We came in too late. I mean,
when exactly, Dr.
From way back. You know, when we're talking about extremism, and it's a process. First of all, radicalization is just the beginning. So you start on the path of radicalization. And in terms of definitions here and trying to understand these concepts, radicalism and extremism and terrorism, those are three concepts. All are different. It's not the same. Okay. So radicalism is standing at a distance from the mainstream. And I need to explain these concepts so that people understand.
Please.
Assaulting the mainstream. Terrorism is the systematic, premeditated, programmatic use of violence or the threat to use violence against non-combatants for ideological, religious, and political objectives. So one starts on the path of radicalization, and on the path of radicalism is not a big problem. Radicalism is not a big problem because radicalism is open-minded, is open-ended. You can talk to radicals, you can discuss issues, you can convince them
radical positions,
absolutely, and there is political radicalism, absolutely, and we have this debate all the time. But extremism on the other side is close-minded, is close-ended. So they are assaulting the mainstream.
Where does fundamentalism come in?
Fundamentalism is a terminology that was first used, came into being in 1911. It was mainly associated with the Baptist, Presbyterian Christian groups in southern states in the United States of America. So that's when the word fundamentalism started being used. But it gained currency in 1979 and association with Islam after the fall of, or rather the infamous
9/11.
No, not 9/11. 1979 with the Iranian Islamic Revolution. So then, when we talked about the Islamic fundamentalist, which in itself is an oxymoron, you do have. You can have that. You can have Hindu fundamentalists. You can have, you know, these guys that are running riots in various parts of India.
Great. Yeah. We'd like to bring the point closer. Quote unquote, speaking their language. What are some of the reasons that we as Kenyans, or the government, or the authorities, or the society, in a way, might have contributed as to why this number of people were led into joining these forces? But all this and many more will be coming back after this very short break. Don't you go away. We are just getting started with Dr. Mustafa Ali from Building Resilience Against Violent Extremism. We'll be back in a moment. Don't go away.
Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation.
Wake up to exciting mornings every day. Active Jumatatu with Muhammad Obura. Tech Tuesday with Yusuf Farah. Wednesday, the special edition Business Chat with Ibtisam Jamal. All about your health on Healthy Thursdays with Mariam Wacharo. Aisha Khan with thorny pertinent issues every Friday on the Round Table. Fresh discussions, direct probe in Sobah Show, only on Horizon TV.
Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation.
Exactly 35 minutes past 8 p.m. Welcome back to the second segment of the live Real Talk. We are with Dr. Mustafa Ali, looking at political and religious radicalization. Dr. Mustafa, on 6th of May 2013, the New Humanitarian released an article talking about radicalization in the country. Of course, they coupled it up with some bits of extremism and terrorism. And some of the reasons they quoted that were leading into this heightened radicalization then were poverty levels, unemployment, marginalization, nepotism of the highest level. Any truth to this, Doctor?
Yeah, that's right. Now, let me break it down. Let me break down these reasons and put them in two boxes. One is the structural reasons, the reasons that push many young people to join violent extremist groups. And then there is the appeal, the reasons that pull these young people to join violent extremist groups. Some of those that you've mentioned belong to the structural yeah, that push many people to join violent extremist groups. So it's marginalization, exclusion, dispossession, human rights abuses, ungoverned spaces or lack of government in itself, previous support to or membership to violent extremist groups, corruption. These are some of the reasons that push many into violence.
Talk of it structurally. Talk of a structural solution. We have the authorities that we pay taxes, we pay their salaries, and we expect them to protect us. That's and right. To mitigate some of these acts. Yeah. What did Brave came to do different from what the government is doing?
No, we are not. We didn't come to do anything different. We came to feel or to do something that was not being done. And what was that was to focus on the ideology. Our main objective was to push back the ideology of terrorism, to push back the ideology of extremism, to correct the misuse of Islam, misinterpretation of Islam that was confusing many young people. But to do so, we also had to explain some of the push factors, the structural factors that are pushing these young people into extremism. And so you see, what happens in any conflict, you know, sometimes you have conflict that transforms itself. What we are dealing today, Faisal, with terrorism and extremism in terms of the consequences, are not even addressing now the root causes of the problem, and that is poverty, exclusion, marginalization. Now we are splitting hairs in terms of what does Islam say about jihad, khilafah, hijra, you know, and all that. Then aside from the structural reasons, then the appeal reasons.
But these structural problems are still existing. If anything, maybe they've gone worse, because you've seen on social media for the past 2 days, I lost my job and who will serve my job? They've taken good part of particularly the Twitter on social media. And I mean, if anything, then we're expecting the poverty levels even to increase. Yeah, unemployment is becoming a case.
This will continue. I don't think we are going to resolve these structural issues. They depend on many factors and dynamics that are global, local, governance, corruption. You know, I mean, you have tribalism is entrenched in this country. You have what we now call as tribal entrepreneurs, who are the ones now controlling people's thinking and can buy votes, can control, you know, tribes voting as a bloc.
Yes.
Of course, that's killing this country, and we are eating that tribalism that we've had for a very long time. Faisal, it's impossible to eradicate poverty. I don't think we're going to eradicate poverty in our lifetime.
You think so?
I don't think we will eradicate poverty. It will always be there. I just came back from New York 2 weeks ago, and there's poverty in the streets of New York, in the United States of America. There are 6 million people going without food in the United States of America. So we're talking about one of the most industrialized nations.
Wow.
Now, what however, we can deal with is the relative poverty. That can be dealt with.
And that's what I want to ask. If
Yeah.
we cannot deal with poverty, I mean, we can never deal with poverty.
Yeah.
Then,
So what we need to
does that
understand
mean that
then here-
radicalization, extremism,
No,
and
no, and
terrorism
this
always
is
gonna be part and
this
parcel
is
of
where
us?
perhaps as a scholar would disagree with most people who say that poverty is the root cause of extremism. It's not. It's a contributing factor. It contributes to extremism. Yeah, and so it's not the cause. It's not the root cause of extremism. It contributes, just like many other factors contributes into extremism that results in terrorism.
Okay.
Yeah, because and you need to look at, there are many communities that are in abject poverty, and they are not extreme in the way they look at things. So why is that the case? And there is poverty in this country. So I'm not trying to downplay poverty, but it does contribute. It does contribute in significant ways to extremism and terrorism. But poverty that is imposed on people because of dispossession, and this is what we've seen in the northern parts of the country, marginalized, excluded, coastal area. So that's more painful, and that drives people into extremism faster than when poverty happens naturally.
I would love to look at in you trying to demystify the whole concept of jihad and Islam and Khilafah and what it really means, basically pushing the idea of terrorism back. I'd love to talk about that since you started 4 years down the line right now.
Yeah.
Your success story and your success rate. I'd love to talk about that. But before that, interesting. Life and Peace Institute in March 1st, 2016 say that the target group is between 15 to 30 years. And Nordisk Africa Institute, an article by Siku Helston, I hope I got that name correct, states, and I quote, according to observers familiar with the situation nowadays, recruitment is open. Sometimes police and security staff are involved. Such activities, especially, usually in return for bribes. These things are happening, and these are people that we entrust our life and our security in their hands, and they are involved in terrorism acts and extremism and radicalization, yet we are outside here trying to do the reverse.
Yeah,
These are the law enforcers.
Yeah, you will always have dirty cops, and it's true that some of them have been involved and have taken bribes to look the other way when a weapon is transported across the border or passes through the other to theaters of violence or to the wrong people in the wrong hands. But Faisal, here is the point, and this is really what I would like to share with the young people, especially the youth.
Yeah.
The problem of terrorism is very complicated. If we start talking about the origins of Al-Qaeda and ISIS, many young people will be shocked actually where the origins of some of these groups are. It's such high-level political game that is played out there by states and deploying non-state actors. And many of these young people in Majengo here, Nairobi or Mombasa, cannot comprehend those high political games that are being played there. And these young people are just used as pawns on these political games. So
it's political.
It is political. There's nothing religious about terrorism and violent extremism. Absolutely nothing. Religion is just being instrumentalized.
All this global militia that you're looking at,
no,
ISIS,
there's
Al-Shabaab,
absolutely
Al-Qaeda.
nothing to do with religion. It is what we call the politicization of religion. In Afghanistan, when the Soviets invaded
That's gonna be my next
Afghanistan,
question, yes.
you know what happened there? Soviets invaded Afghanistan. They occupied the place. US had been defeated in Vietnam in 1967, and US had vowed to give the Soviets a dose of what they gave them in Vietnam. So what did they do? They mobilized. They trained people in Afghanistan. They together with, I don't want to mention the other countries, but some countries in the Gulf and in the Middle East. One country, or some countries in the West, provided the arms, the military equipment and training, and another one provided the ideology. In Afghanistan, madrasas were weaponized.
Wow.
Yeah, let me give you an example. In a class, a kindergarten, children, you know, when you and I were growing up in kindergarten, you were taught how to count 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yes.
And you'd use either oranges
Sticks.
or bottle tops or sticks. In Afghanistan, in the madrasas, and this was in the curriculum developed by some curriculum agencies in the West, the instruction was they were putting live bullets on the table. So a kindergarten child is asked to count using live bullets to indoctrinate into them from a very early age about war. Let me give you another example, and I hope we have time. A kid is asked to do a subtraction, a mathematics subtraction. And by the way, these books are there. It was actually provided by, they were made in a place in Nebraska in the United States of America. So in that, one of the calculations a kid is supposed to do is saying, 50 Soviet soldiers are passing through a ridge. They are ambushed by the Mujahideen. 27 are killed. How many remain? So a kid does the math. Yeah. So, you know, and this is in a madrasa, and this is, you know, subliminal indoctrination of that child to become a warrior. Now, what happened there, Islam was also used. All these debates about jihad and mujahideen that we're talking about, you know, was really, that was the petri dish and the laboratory for all these problems that we're having today.
Wow.
And so it's big power politics, and you know, people running around here and talking about jihad and Islam and understands very little the geopolitical issues, power games, Cold War issues, and trying to link that with what is happening today, get confused. And I would urge young people, what you need to do, just avoid. You know, don't join these groups. They're all political, and they will mess they'll mess your lives, and they are not going to benefit you on anything themselves. As many young people have gone to Somalia, go there and find out actually what's going on in Somalia. It's about clan, it's about power politics there. And now we have, it's a whole industry. Now we have about 37 different actors in Somalia. 37 in that theater of war, 37 different actors, including states. Actually, there are about 21 different states fighting there. Goodness. So all these things, it's very easy for people to come and say, you know, it's jihad, and you go there, Muslims are killing each other. Somalis are killing each other in Somalia.
Supremacy battle.
Muslims are killing each other in Somalia. You cannot call that jihad. Excuse me.
Hold it there, Dr. We're going to pay our bills, but don't you go away, because this is going to be a very, 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 very short break. Very short break. Don't go away. I'm going to be back right now.
Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation.
Are you finding difficulty to find us on Azam decoders? Rescan your Azam decoders and find us on channel 008. Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation.
Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation.
Thank you so much, Mohammed Gitonga, for your account. And we are back in the last, and unfortunately, the last segment. I'm sorry we could not open our lines for your calls this evening because, I mean, the amount of information that we're getting tonight is just on another level. Dr. Ari, we were talking about structural. We haven't even touched on appeal. And we're looking at a cancerous problem in this country at this point in time. Corruption. For as long as we haven't found a solution to this cancerous disease, will we ever tackle the issue of extremism and terrorism and jihad and the misconceptions and myths and all this?
Yeah, with regard to corruption, and this is where it takes us wholly to the whole issue of actually political extremism. Corruption is corrosive. Corruption is terrible. Corruption in this country has stagnated this country, stunted growth. And I'm glad that it is being fought now by very serious, well-meaning actors, individuals, young officers really struggling to deal with these issues. But of course, they're being fought back by old cartels and the networks that have been the
system.
That's right. And the corruption in this country, unfortunately, is ethnicized. It is tribalized. So, you know, somebody steals money meant for a dam in his own village, and then it's people in his own village around to say, why are you executing? Why are you targeting our people?
Our people,
you know,
our people mentality.
Because they have been indoctrinated to believe that, you know, they are tribal entrepreneurs, and we know them, Faisal, would do good for them. Let me tell you, they don't. They still including the vaccines that's supposed to go and take care of their children. And the money the proceeds that comes out of corruption, unfortunately, is used to politicize or rather to bribe people. During political rallies, you see all these, you know, when people go to political rallies and do not even hear about reason, they're only focusing on personalities and personalities with monies that they have corrupted, have stolen, and they will do anything for that particular personality to get that money, whether it's 50 shillings, 100 shillings, or 2,000 shillings, including stoning campaigns. And, you know, that's
political radicalization.
That's political radicalization, that's right. You don't have to be, it doesn't have to be in a faith, no. The moment you disagree with your political opponent and take a stone and throw it on that political opponent, that's violence, and it's violent extremism. And most of these people, unfortunately, are paid, and they're paid by the dirty money.
Peanuts.
That's right.
Peanuts.
That's right.
For you to turn against your neighbor,
That's
against
right.
your fellow citizen.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about the appeal function. We've spoken about the structural talk of corruption, unemployment, lack of resources, poverty, and all those. Structural. Of course, these are things that we don't have a direct control on.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the appeal.
So some of the reasons that we would lump under the appeal factors that pull people to join these violent extremist groups is just charismatic leaders. Charismatic leaders that are able to present the grievances in a way that gels, in a way that, you know, is communicated to the population. And you will see that most of those people, including the transnational terrorist groups and organizations, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, if you watch their videos, if you look at their messages, they are professionally packaged to an extent that young girl in South Sea say that this is the people that are going to save the world, and so they actually would walk from Nairobi, would want to walk from Nairobi to go and join them.
And join them. And then, join
yeah,
the
so
force.
it's the message itself. Those 8 various themes that I talked about earlier,
Yes,
the meta-narratives,
the meta-narratives,
and all the narratives that come underneath that, and the meta-narratives, just for the viewers, include jihad, khilafah, Jahiliya, Tamkin, Al-Wala, Wal-Bara, Takfir. These are the meta-narratives. We don't have time to talk about all that. But it has confused the Muslim world as well because of the way they are being interpreted. And it's not just, in this part of the world. If you go to Pakistan, for example, today, you will see Muslims killing each other, Shias and Sunnis. And they don't understand that what they are fighting about in terms of Shiism and Sunnism is political. Because if you ask, and I would like you to ask this question to clerics who come here, what was Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Was he Shia or Sunni?
Wow.
So why do we have to kill each other?
Everyone would want to pull on his side.
On account of a sectarian difference that was not even religious, it was political. Why would
It was
we
political?
Want, it was no. The
differences.
The differences, and it's religionized, but the root of
basis.
It's political. If it's religion, okay. If it's religion, and we say we follow the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what was his Sunnah? It's Islam, isn't it?
Yeah.
Was there anything to do with Shiism and Sunnism during the Prophet's time? Yeah, so why do we call ourselves, why do we start to sectarianize ourselves in terms of Sunni that, Shia that? And, I mean, these are all political, and we were, of course, forewarned about these political differences that will be sugar-coated in a religious sense. And let's not go into this.
Let's not delve
but
deeper
unfortunately, this sectarianization of Islam, we see what is happening in the Gulf today, the challenges in Yemen, in Iraq, in Syria, is about sectarianization of religion. And extremism undoubtedly has flourished because of that. Yeah. And so the kind of narratives that we see there talking about jihad, go and kill a Sunni, go and kill a Shia, is being peddled, and Quranic ayahs are being quoted to actually justify those killings. And yet we are told in Islam, if you save one soul, one life, it's like you save the whole humanity. If you kill one, you've killed the entire humanity. But we get it wrong. And so the appeal of these narratives from terrorist groups is such that many young people fall for this without questioning the veracity of their claims and misinterpretations of the Holy Quran.
Interesting. Dr. What would be your parting shot to the young man and woman?
This message goes to mainly the young people, and I want to say this, that there is a hadith in Sahih Muslim that says the extremists will perish.
Authentic hadith.
Authentic hadith.
Wow. Nothing to add there. The extremists will perish.
Yeah, the extremists are on a ruinous path, and that the whole principle of wasatiyah in Islam, of moderation, is something that guided the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was never an extremist. He never engaged in immoderate activities. He was always on the path, mustaqim, the straight path. He never deviated.
And he was moderate.
And moderate is a word that has issues. He was mainstream.
Mainstream.
He was mainstream.
Quite ambiguous at this point. Do you mind breaking it down?
Mainstream is really the Prophet and the way he lived. Anything that is not mainstream is on the extremes.
Interesting. Brave, where do we find you? You say it is a movement that anyone and everyone can join. Where do we find you?
You go to just go to the website and go to www.cscrcenter.org. You will find it there. Or just type on your Google, Building Resilience Against Violent Extremism in Kenya, Brave.
How does one join the movement?
You will find a number there that you can call. You can set up your committees. There are committees that have been established around the country, mainly by, there's brave imams, there's brave ulamas, there's brave youth, brave sisters network, brave professionals, brave teachers, brave...
So just find your cluster.
I'd like to find, you could start brave broadcasters, Faisal, that actually condemn and repudiate violent extremists and terrorists, and actually, you know, increase the knowledge of many Muslims about this whole issue of terrorism. So anybody can join the movement, and you would find some guidance if you visit the website.
The website.
And the numbers that you'll find there to call.
Physical office?
The fiscal office is on Riverside Drive. It's on 50 Riverside Drive, and you will find an office there for Brave.
Dr. I promise you this is not over, inshallah. I'd love to have you still here and we expound more on the appeal, because I'm sure you've just scratched on the base. It's just a tip of the iceberg. We haven't looked at political radicalization. We haven't expounded on it. We just touched on it briefly. Right. Inshallah. Promise to be back, Dr.
I will come back.
Inshallah.
Thank you.
And we will definitely call you, Dr. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for making time for us.
Thank you.
And you have it. That's radicalization. It's cancerous. It's bigger than we thought. Our ticket to Slumberland tonight, we are talking about courage. And we borrow a quote from Mel Robinson. He says, if you have the courage to start, then you have the courage to succeed. I'd love to integrate this with a verse from the Holy Quran, where God says, فَإِذَا عَزَمْتَ فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ. When you've already put the intention, you've already intended, then just trust in Allah and start the process and move. Of course, it's going to be quite difficult. It's going to be quite hard. It's going to be quite tough, ups and downs, just as life is. It's going to be tough. But every time you feel like giving up, you feel like this is too much for you, you feel like this was not meant for you, just remind yourself why you started. That's my ticket to Slumberland. See you next week, same place, same time. I've been your host, Faisal Kassim, and this has been Live Real Talk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.